welcome. And today we have with us Professor Nandini Sahu. And so nice of her to join us for an evening with a poetic evening, I would say, with Professor Nandini Sahu. She is a major voice in contemporary Indian English literature. She has accomplished her doctorate in English literature under the guidance of late Professor Niranjan Mohanty, Professor of English, Visva Bharati, Shantiniketan. She has been widely published in India, USA, UK, Africa, and Pakistan. Apart from numerous other literary awards, she is a triple gold medalist in English literature and has received the gold medal from the Honorable Vice President of India for her contributions to English studies in India in the year 2019. He is the author and editor of 14 books: The Other Voice, The Silence, a poetry collection, The Post Colonial Space, Writing the Self and the Nation, Silver Poems on My Lips, a poetry collection, Folklore and the Alternative Modernities, Volume 1, Folklore and Alternative Modernities, Volume 2, Sukama and Other Poems, Suvarna Rekha, Sita, a poem, and Dynamics of Children's Literature, Zero Point, and Selected Poems of Nandini Sahu, published from New Delhi. Presently, she is the Director of Foreign, Professor of English at Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Her areas of research interest cover Indian literature, new literatures, folklore and culture studies, American literature, children's literature, and critical theory. She is he is the chief editor, founder editor of Interdisciplinary Journal of Literature and Language, a biannual peer-reviewed journal in English. And today's topic is myth in Indian English poetry. And the books she will be covering, she'll be narrating poems from the books Prayers to Lord Jagannath by late Professor Niranjan Mohanty, her mentor, and Sita by Professor Nandini Sahu. So I won't take any much time, and over to you, Professor.
May I?
Yes, please, over to you.
Yes,
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you, Rachna ji, for this kind introduction. Respected Vishnu ji, Sonali ji, dear Meghna ji, Rachna ji, and Coral in absentia, who introduced me to you, and all the wonderful people out there. I can see most ladies there. It feels good to see so many people participating and so many important poets, critics, and creative writers in this to discuss the poetry books. This topic, myth in Indian literature, in Indian poetry, I'm afraid I will be more, I mean, more theory oriented, more of a critical discussion will be there in my lecture today, because the critic and the poet in me somehow, in my personality, they dominate each other. When I take my classes, the creative writer comes in, and when I write literature, creative writing, poetry, the theorist in me, sometimes she also comes in. So I'll try not to create any conflict between the two. But still, when I talk about myth in Indian literature, I have to talk about myth, folklore, and then demythification. What is demythification? All these things I have to talk. After that, I will go to the two texts. So just now Rachna ji was asking me how I am planning my lecture today. So probably I will take 30-35 minutes to speak, and another 20 minutes can be devoted to the discussion part. So initially I'll talk about what is myth and what is mythification and what is demythification. How to mythify somebody, a character, and then how to demythify the same person, the same character. And then I'll be giving references from Jagannath myth, Jagannath culture. I basically belong to Odisha, and I did my PhD under late Professor Niranjan Mohanty, a wonderful poet himself who passed away in 2008. And I did my PhD under his supervision. And in fact, I learned the art of writing poetry from Sir when I was very young. So I would be talking about Jagannath cult, Jagannath culture, vis-a-vis his poetry collection, Prayers to Lord Jagannath. It's a very famous book, Prayers to Lord Jagannath. A lot of research has gone into that book. So I would try to introduce Jagannath culture and the importance of that book to my audiences today. And then next, I would be talking about my own poetry book, Sita, a poem. So this is the poetry book, Sita. I'd be talking a little bit about that, the Sita myth, and then how I have deconstructed the character Sita from the Ramayana, and I have distributed Sita among all women and even men, the Sita-ness in each one of us. I will talk about that. I will demythify, personify Sita, and I'll talk about this text towards the end of my lecture. I'll take only 5 minutes for my text. I'll devote more time to my sir, my teacher, my mentor, Professor Niranjan Mohanty. So now let's come to the topic, the popular definition of the term myth. It refers to stories passed down from generation to generation, isn't it? So myths have an additional framework. According to Alan Swingwood in 1977, the critic has written about myths that it is to eliminate the historical basis of institutions and processes and create within popular consciousness an acceptance of the inevitable facts of class inequality and power. This is how he has defined myth. I would problematize this idea of acceptance vis-a-vis mythification of Lord Jagannath, of Jagannath culture from Odisha, and Sita. And in the long poem by late Professor Niranjan Mohanty, I would try to problematize the fact. I believe today's literature is one step ahead. You look at Indian literature today, so much of work is being done, such important folklore and mythology and all those things have entered into Indian English poetry today. So I think Indian literature is one step ahead of the idea of acceptance, and literature humanizes everything. We try to find human elements, the flesh and blood elements in literature, by demythifying them. And in order to understand the term demythification, myth and then demythification, the first question one can ask me is, what is mythification? Webster Dictionary defines mythification as to create a myth about a person, place, tradition, and then make it something very special. And demythification is to remove the mythical characteristics from the same person and talk about the same character, the same person in flesh and blood. And in the Lord Jagannath myth, Niranjan Mohanty, late Professor Niranjan Mohanty, he has humanized the Lord, and he has talked about the important social issues that need urgent attention today. So he has written social mobility literature, and he has used myth, Jagannath myth, as his theoretical tool. And he has talked about the issues that need urgent attention, and by the Lord himself, since he is the supreme power. And he has used myth as a metaphor for social change. Even I use myth as a metaphor for social change. In a couple of my lectures, I have already talked about witness literature. Dear scholars, please take down this point. Witness literature, I would be referring more often. In the court of law, the witness plays a major role in giving a shape to any case. Similarly, in case of social change, or in case of making any positive change to the society, the writer, the poet, the creative artist, he or she plays the role of a witness. So we are instrumental in social change. Nadine Gordimer has coined this term. So I will talk how the mythical characters that late Professor Niranjan Mohanty has used, and then I have taken that tradition in my writing also, how we have tried to create witness literature by mythifying and then demythifying those characters. In the Sita myth, I have discussed how by providing women with the idealized role models and creating their own definitions of morality, the society uses myth as an instrument to excuse its ideology on women and then to execute its ideology on women. I analyze a literary text that has tried to reinterpret mythology from a feminist perspective. And in so doing, it has subverted the mythical stereotyped images of women. We have forgotten the important aspects of Sita's character. We have forgotten, the society has conveniently forgotten the bold, contemporary, progressive, independent decision maker Sita, and then created a myth around Sita as a docile woman who is follower, silent, subverted follower of her husband, and who goes to the forest, who gives 2 fire tests. So we have kind of mythified that character. So in my text, I have tried to demythify that. I have, in a way, attempted to give a human character to Sita and talk about the progressive, independent, positive, optimistic, eco-feministic Sita who takes her own decisions, who is a great healer, a great teacher, a great single mother, and a teacher to the Ashramites, and a woman who doesn't complain or cry over her destiny, rather, who has taken whatever comes her way in a very positive note. So, that kind of an optimistic, progressive Sita I have created in my book. I will talk about that. The popular definition of the term myth refers to stories passed down from generation to generation, isn't it? Myth, however, has an additional function, which is to abolish the historical basis of institutions as an opposite ideology to palace paradigm. Now, palace paradigm is a critical theory which folklorists use in their research and pedagogy. I'm a folklorist. I have designed quite a few important academic programs for my university, Indira Gandhi National Open University, where I'm a professor of English and I'm the director of the School of Foreign Languages. And I have designed quite a few academic programs on folklore and culture studies. And we use palace paradigm as one of the critical theories to discuss our chapters. Now, what is palace paradigm? It's a very important and interesting critical theory. You must do a little bit Google search and reading about it. But to simplify it for the general audience or for the poets and creative writers sitting out there, I would say that the palace paradigm problematizes, challenges looking at the society from the palace or from the upper class, looking at everything from the prince, from the king, from the queen, from the general's point of view. So palace paradigm problematizes that. And it wants to look at the society from the common folks' point of view. This is where we talk about folklore, tribal literature, literature of the common mass, Margi and Deshi. Margi is the literature of the elites, Deshi is the literature of the folks. So Margi and Deshi, a queer amalgamation, a combination of these two, the combination of the Margi and the Deshi, the classical and the folk, or the literature of the poor, the tribes, combining everything together, we have created our Indian literature. So the theories like high and low, popular and mass, Margi and Desi are not actually applicable to Indian literature. In Indian literature, literary culture, look at Jagannath culture, look at our Ramayana, Mahabharata, whole lot of folk Ramayans. When I wrote this text, Sita, I read 300 Ramayans. Most of those were folk Ramayans. So the point of view of the oral Ramayans, the folk Ramayans, they have actually influenced me to a great extent. In a lot of folk Ramayans, Sita has been narrated as an independent, progressive woman, and in some other folk Ramayans, they have tried to justify the oral literatures. They have tried to justify the desertion of Sita. So I have gone through all of them, and without framing any judgment, any opinion on those folk and classical Ramayans, I created my own narratology. I created my own character Sita by constructing her, by placing her vis-a-vis the contemporary women in Rachnaji, in Meghnadji, in myself, in all those wonderful women sitting in front of me. I see some kind of Sita-ness in the optimism, in the acceptance, in the broad outlook, in the ecofeminism. So that is how I have demythified. So myths, they have an additional function, as I said, to abolish the historical basis of institutions, higher class institutions, to the ideological institutions of the palace. So problematizing, challenging the palace paradigm, I have created a kind of popular imagination. Professor Niranjan Mohanty has created a kind of popular imagination of the Jagannath myth, of an acceptance of the inevitable facts of class inequality and power. Now, before I go to discuss Lord Jagannath's culture, I feel honored and humbled to talk about the ideology of Lord Jagannath and the culture out there. Lord Jagannath, you might have seen that he has a dark skin, completely black. So through his dark skin, black skin, he is giving a message to the society about class and color consciousness. We should not have any kind of rejection of the dark skin. You must have seen that in our society there is a lot of body shaming. Everyone is trying to become fair, and people are trying to become fair, and they find dark skin a bit problematic. And Lord Jagannath culture gives the message that there is no difference between the dark and the fair, the black and the white. There is no binaries. Everything is beautiful. Only thinking makes it so. There is nothing ugly, there is nothing good or bad. Only thinking makes it so. That is the message of Jagannath culture, so close to ecology. And then Lord Jagannath, he has incomplete limbs. You might have seen that his hands are up to this only little bit arms are there, and he doesn't have legs. He has only up to the abdomen and little lower than that. He doesn't have the legs. So by projecting his own image like that, Jagannath culture, Lord Jagannath, he gives acceptance to the physically challenged. So if the creator of the universe, the Lord himself, who is an avatar of Lord Vishnu, as we believe, if he himself is dark skinned and he himself is physically challenged, if I can say, who he himself doesn't have completed limbs, still he can be the creator of the universe, then why should we, how can we look down upon people who are physically challenged or people who have a dark skin? So such close to the cultural ecology, such close to humanity, isn't it? Now, I'll go to that in detail, in depth, but let me just give you a little bit idea about the use of myth in Indian poetry. I'll quickly cover that since I have 100 texts in my mind. I cannot cover all of them. I have only 30 minutes with me. So, Indian English poetry is remarkable. It gives us the perspectives of various cultural aspects of India. You all have been reading poetry. It has stood out both during the pre-independence period as well as the post-independence period. Mythology has created deep into our lives. It has gone deep into our lives, especially in the last few decades. Authors are increasingly dependent upon Indian mythology for their themes. Once upon a time, the way to familiarize students with Indian mythology, we had Amar Chitra Katha stories, and everything from Ramayana to Mahabharata, and the pantheon of the 33 million Hindu gods was dealt with in those texts. Mythology somehow captures our imagination, but that is not where it stops. It enters our life and literature. Authors are not only taking up mythology and visualizing it the way they want to, but also molding and interpreting it to write meaningful literature and look at mythology from different perspectives. The poems in the pre-independence era, they were written in two parts. The first phase was Indian poetry and the literary renaissance during the pre-independence. Poets like Henry Derozio, Michael Madhusudhan Dutt, Toru Dutt, the Indian legends, and I remember the poem Sita by Toru Dutt here. So they have extensively used Indian mythology as their imagination and as their material for the primary imagination. The poets of 1950s to 1990s, they were trying to establish the imitative part of poetry. Their language was somewhat Victorian, but they followed the British romantics, but still Indian mythology and folklore could not escape them, neither they could escape those. And in the second phase of Indian poetry, the works of the Indian English poets was full of nationalism, spirituality, and mysticism. Poets like Swami Vivekananda, Swami Yogananda, then Aravindo Ghosh, Rabindranath Tagore, Sarojini Naidu, again Toru Dutt, they created a body of poetry which were closely associated with the Vedas and the Upanishads. They used mythology and to some extent folklore to write their poetry. And Indian English poets of the post-independence period, little bit modern, I can say, to when the modern age actually started. Poets like Nizam Ezekiel, P. Lal, Dom Marius, A.K. Ramanujan, Pritish Nandi, Jayant Mahapatra, Kamala Das, Arun Kolatkar, and Bibu Padi, then coming to Niranjan Mohanty, and many poets, many poets are there. I cannot take the names of each one of them. They also wrote a kind of poetry which was close to our cultural ecology. And in 1958, P. Lal and K.R. Rao, they edited the first modern Indo-Anglian poetry anthology, where they have taken all these poets and their poetry related to myth and culture. I would just take a few names where mythology, Indian myth and religion have been extensively used by the poets. One example is A.K. Ramanujan's text, Prayers to Lord Murugan. I was going through that text. It's wonderful. He is a thorough eco-feminist. A lot of feministic ideas are there in his poetry, and then close to ecology, livestock, preservation, food, water conservation, environment. I find everything. Lord Murugan is the ancient Dravidian god of fertility, joy, youth, beauty, war, and love. So in this collection, Prayers to Lord Murugan, A.K. Ramanujan has dealt with all these themes like fertility, joy, creation, youth, beauty, positivity, optimism, greenery, so full of life he has talked about in that poem. And then the last part of the poem is very impressive. He has written with the 3 lines, Lord of answers, cure us at once of prayers. He says, I don't want to pray because prayers are kind of desperate feelings of an individual. So cure me of all prayers, make me one with you. He wants to be one with the supreme. Then another poetry collection where I find the use of mythology extensively is Jejuri by Arun Kolatkar. And this also deals with, he says towards the last part of the collection, he has written, the physical idol can be created, but God cannot be created. So he says that idol worship, or sticking to any particular image of God can only create a narrow feeling inside you. So he finds God in humanity. So in Jejuri also, you can find Arun Kolatkar. He talks about the human God, demythifying God. The Lord Shiva is the important God in the text. The collection Jejuri, he humanizes Lord Shiva. And then next you come to Jayant Mahapatra from Odisha. Jayant Mahapatra was a huge influence on Niranjan Mohanty. Under the shadow of the temples, Lord Jagannath Puri and the Konark Sun Temple, the Lingaraj Temple in Bhubaneswar, Khandagiri, Udayagiri, Dholigiri, Mahapatra has written poems on the Odishan landscape, legends, mythology. Morality and didacticism of the Odia folks, he has written about that, their faith and belief system, their rites and rituals, and dharma, the young boy of Konark Temple who sacrificed his life for the sake of the 1200 artisans. He glorifies those characters. So in Jayant Mahapatra's poetry also, I have found the use of myth to a great extent, and he was a major influence to the poet Niranjan Mohanty. Now, I would simply just touch upon Indian fiction. Chitra Banerjee Devakaruni's Palace of Illusions, the novel I was going through. She had written it in 2008, I guess, and it's a rethinking and retelling of Mahabharata from Draupadi's point of view. Similar kind of novel is written by Pratibha Ray Jagyaseni. It has a similar tone. It's an epistolary novel, and it has been written as a letter to Lord Krishna. Draupadi, just before her life comes to an end near the Himalayas, she writes a long letter to her Sakha, to her Lord Krishna, describing the incidents, the events, and everything of the Mahabharata, but from a woman's perspective, from a woman's point of view. But let's not go into that. This lecture is dedicated to poetry. So poets have written poems on Salabeg, Krishna, Sita, and recently the Sati series novels are coming up from new writers like Koral Dasgupta. She's writing this Sati series of novels, and many writers are taking up mythical characters. There are hundreds of texts dealing with Indian mythology, but today I'll be discussing only these two. So let's go to the first text of my focus, Prayers to Lord Jagannath by late Professor Niranjan Mohanty, my mentor. Uh, well, with the death of Indian English poet Professor Niranjan Mohanty in 2008, a part of my poetic self was dead. It was from him that I had learnt the alphabets of poetry. It was Professor Mohanty who had introduced me to the muses when I was just 13 years old, though I had started writing poetry since I was 7 years old. But the intricacies of poetry, I got introduced by Professor Mohanty when I was 13. I was fortunate to know him and also his family from close quarters. And all these years, proudly, I was acknowledged as his research scholar and their very dear daughter. His wife, Mrs. Jayanti Mohanty, daughter, Mrs. Lopamudra Mohanty, and his son, Mr. Ritvik Mohanty, are family to me. Uh, about Mohanty's poetry, I will quote the views of a couple of critics and poets from Odisha. Professor Shalendra Narayan Tripathi from Odisha, an eminent scholar, he writes, I will quote him: Niranjan Mohanty was our Dylan Thomas. Uh, from Balashur, the seaside district of Odisha, it was his Swansea. He raged against the dying of the light. He combined rare energy with the raw breath of imagination. He was sandwiched between Eliot and Neruda and developed a skillful, seductive verbal aplomb that the reader finds in Krishna or Prayers to Lord Jagannath. He was an innocent explorer who calls attention to what we are in possession of. He leaves a big void in Indian English poetry. We shall certainly miss him. He was born the same year as Dylan Thomas died. He writes that, Salendranath Tripathi. In the same journal, Professor Himanshu Shekhar Mahapatra, he is again an important critic from Odisha. He writes, Professor Himanshu Shekhar Mahapatra writes, poets, it is said these days, are made, not born. But the late Niranjan Mohanty, the well-known Indian English poet from Odisha, was a contravention of this new age wisdom. In making poetry as naturally as a silkworm made silk, he soared above the sterile academic contest between making and birthing. For many of us, condemned to playing our trade in prose, he was a daily reminder of the minor miracles of versification. Morning clearly showed the day in his case. His poetic talent manifested itself clearly, and by the time he was doing his master's in English at Ravensa College in 1970s, poems were flowing freely from his pen. The inspiring spectacle of the Indo-English poet Jayanta Mahapatra, making waves at the time from Ravensa with his crystalline poetic publications, must have led him to think hopefully of publishing his poems. Yeah, Professor Mohanty had been publishing from a very young age, and he died at 56, which is no age to die. In the year 2006, Professor Mohanty has written me a letter in which he spoke about the higher ideals, truths, and philosophies of life. He had written that letter from America to me. He was a thorough optimist and was deeply pained by seeing any sort of pessimism anywhere. I would like to quote a few lines from the letter. This letter was from Shanti Niketan, written to me in 2006. This is my golden treasury. I treasure that letter. He writes, is there meaning left anywhere in the world? In relationships, in words, in silences, in shadows, in God, in love, in anger, in material comforts, in mechanical routine, in dreams, in dream crossed twilights, beyond the horizon of mind, in breathtaking disease, in death? One has to posit a meaning, rather a new meaning in all that we encounter. All that we despise to encounter here or elsewhere, and without it, living becomes genuine, ineffective, as though a piece of charcoal after it is burned. Live life with delight in the present. Memories are quicksand. They drive you to darkness, to drown in another darkness. Who else has taught me? about life other than Professor Niranjan Mohanty, my teacher, my friend, philosopher, and guide? Writing for more than 3 decades with 8 poetry collections, Mohanty had earned a name for himself as a poet and a critic. His poems appear to have a continuous relation with various aspects of isolation, loneliness, solitude, alienation of the self from external realities in a world without any apparent resolution. This is the existential dilemma of most modern writers, isn't it? While Mohanty's world is filled with personal pain, guilt, remorse, hunger, desire, and moments of renewal, his environment is filled with symbols of belief drawn from ordinary lives of the people of Odisha. He has written so much about the cultural ecology of Odisha, the temples, the Hindu festivals, the ancient monuments, mythology. It will appear to anyone that he is a poet with a high level of fidelity to his native environment, a poet's positive response to his geographical as well as cultural surroundings plays a significant role in assuming a mask of the personal in him. It will be more realistic to accept Mohanty as he was, a product of his circumstances, both historical and literary, one with a primarily rural and romantic sensibility that was totally Indian in its thematic and ethical orientation, as Indian as his contemporaries in the other Indian languages. His world is colored with the historicity and religiosity of the cultural past of Odisha, which can be best examined by prayers to Lord Jagannath. Let me quote the first few lines of the text, prayers to Lord Jagannath, from the introduction. I'm quoting, sir, I'm quoting Professor Mohanty. Historians, devotees, poets have often associated Lord Jagannath with Lord Krishna or Nilamadhava or Madhava and Vishnu, Buddha. It is believed that with the gradual rise of the process of Hinduization, Lord Jagannath had been associated with the Hindu gods. But what remains yet a mystery are the strange iconographical representations of the Lord and his brother Balabhadra and sister Subhadra. If you have seen the car festival, you will remember Lord Jagannath, black, Balabhadra, white, Subhadra, yellow, bright yellow color, two brothers and one sister coming out of the temple to the common masses. No caste, no creed, no religious boundaries. Everyone can touch them, everyone can pull the car in the car festival. He is without hands and feet, yet he is revered as the unmoved mover. He traverses through the universe in order to examine the plight of his people. Precisely because of this altruistic and generous attitude, Lord Jagannath is considered to be the most human of all Hindu gods. The relationship between his devotees and himself is not one sided. Therefore, whenever the Lord was attacked by non Hindus, the Lord did not exhibit his marvels. On the other hand, he waited for his devotees to rescue him. The devotees, apprehending danger, often had him hidden in deep jungles and caves. He is being who shares our joys and sorrows, our pleasures and pains. If we fail to look into his face, we feel we are deprived of his grace. Without uttering his name, there is no escape from life's intricate games. This is what I have quoted from the preface to Prayers to Lord Jagannath by Niranjan Mohanty. Here, I am humbled to talk about Jagannath culture, Jagannath cult, which I already gave a hint now. It is all encompassing, universal, inclusive, and inclusivity, acceptance, religious tolerance, and secularism are the four important sides of Jagannath culture. Lord Jagannath has always remained as mysterious to the knowledge of mankind. He has been accepted as the representative of the Odia people, an embodiment of love, a guiding force behind the cultural heritage of this land, a synthesis of all the Hinduite faiths, and finally, as the God of the universe. The cult of Lord Jagannath, which is very scientific and rational, I find it very scientific. It far from being ritual, and it embodies universal brotherhood, combining elements of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and native religious practices of the tribals. The present form of Jagannath in the Jagannath temple, it originates from the tribal king Vishwavashu, and carried forward by his son-in-law Vidyapati, who brought Nilamadhav from jungle to Puri temple. And then King Indradumna, he constructed a temple on the Blue Hill, and he consecrated the image of Lord Jagannath there. I am quoting this from the Skanda Purana. The presiding deities of the temple, Jagannath, his elder brother Balabhadra, and younger sister Subhadra, portrayed in black, white, and yellow. They represent the three major races of humanity: black, white, and yellow. We Indians, we have yellow skin. White, most of the Western countries, and black, we know that African countries and so many other countries, that the black skin. So the three skin types are represented by Lord Jagannath, Balabhadra, and Subhadra. And this is what is a part of Jagannath cult. And Niranjan Mohanty has focused this in that poetry collection, Prayers to Lord Jagannath. The cult of Jagannath shows special concern and compassion for the lowest of the low, the most unfortunate in the society, with Lord Jagannath's dark skin and incomplete limbs. He marks the glory of the dark skinned and the physically challenged, which I already pointed out. It is this spirit of universal love and acceptance of all religions and all kinds of human beings, the flora and fauna, that has attracted even Muslim devotees such as Salabeg. Poet Niranjan Mohanty has another poetry collection, Salabeg. Some other time I will talk about that. Salabeg, whose songs in praise of Lord Jagannath are more popular among Odias and devotees all over the world. Salabeg's poetry has been translated to all languages, and he was a Muslim scholar, devotee of Lord Jagannath. And Jagannath cult is an amalgamation, a combination of diverse religions like Islam, Hinduism, Brahmanical religions, Buddhism, Shaivism, Sikhism, Tantricism, and Vaishnavism. And the poet Niranjan Mohanty, he glorifies this universal Lord and this mystical Lord in the collection. The image of India that emerges from the poetry, from his poetry, is considered to be the best, where we encounter an India that is too colorful and exotic. The celebrations, he talks about those, an India of bangle sellers, snake charmers, and also of information technology, an India that looks like an Oriental construction by Niranjan Mohanty, the progressive India, the developing India. The formal aspects of his poetry, his rhymes, metrical patterns, images, style make him a modernist, while the context of his poetry, the exotism, the themes, the historicity of his approach, his conventional choice of subject matters, all these things make him a clear, urban, realistic poet. Mohanty satirizes about, he writes very satirical poetry, very ironic themes about the double standards of the modern men who pray the Lord Jagannath as a ritual, but do not bother to care for his ideas of inclusivity and religious tolerance. He is ironic, he is satirical about them. I'm quoting the text, Prayer to Lord Jagannath, quote unquote, the poem. How do you drag so many people to your car? Does each really wear a heart, white like the morning's light? Do they really bother about you as much as they bother about themselves? Do they really see the fire burning with sacrosanct clarity and the eternity in your eyes? Do they ever hear the flute songs, the conch songs, and the echo of horse hooves in the intensity of your eyes, O Lord Jagannath? This is page 3 from Prayers to Lord Jagannath. Eco-critical and eco-feministic concerns of Niranjan Mohanty are evident in his poetic lines on this collection. Prayers to Lord Jagannath establishes a sense of relationship between the self and the other. The personal emotion of the poetic self is chiefly tied very profoundly with the environmental surroundings, tradition, and totality of life. Mohanty has realized the heartbeat of the dead artists in the stone carving, art, and sculpture of the temples of Odisha. He has made an interaction with the inscriptions, He has established the relationship between man, God, and eternity of time, unlike Keats' Grecian on. Mohanty uses his pen to speak against all the social evils, while ironically blaming the Lord for all that. You know, he demythifies God and he humanizes him. He talks to Lord Jagannath as if he were a friend sitting beside him. He blames him for whatever is happening around. He says that if you are all powerful, Mr. God, then why all these things happening in the world? He talks to him like a friend would talk to you. I'm quoting the intense lines from prayers to Lord Jagannath, quote unquote. Do you suppose we the poets are poor reporters and our reporting never reaches the newspaper? Hitherto I had been kind to you. Hitherto I would report everything. Hereafter I would report everything where the heart beats like the rain falling. He says that, oh Lord, I have been so kind to you. I was not reporting everything to you. I was hiding the harsh realities of life from you because I didn't want to hurt your feelings. But now I will not be kind to you anymore. From here, I will report everything that is happening around me to you. You just have a look at the realities of the contemporary society. So, how he demythifies the Lord and he brings him to your coffee table, isn't it? The language he uses, the language Niranjan Mohanty uses, embodies the emotion with such intimacy with the Lord that it creates an excitement of passion and emotion in the mind and heart of the readers. His prayers come from the deepest corners of the heart. Like a true mystic and a saint, Mohanty reaches a transcendental level of love and adoration for the Lord. In the process, he succeeds in reducing the gap between the God and his devotees. He demythifies. Lord Jagannath has played different roles in all his incarnations: Vishnu, Ram, Buddha, Vaman avatar, then Jagannath avatar, so many avatars. And he talks about those and brings it out in the beautiful verse lines. I'm quoting: Lord Jagannath, I will abuse you with words reproachful and mean. Don't take action that would redeem me. Murderer, I would call you, for you murdered your uncle to quench the heart's dormant desire. A thrown thief, I would call you. Playing on your simple flute, you stole the hearts of the wistful gopi women. A precious magician, I would call you, for you stunned your mother, showing her the universe revolving in your mouth. So, he goes to all the avatars of Lord Vishnu, of Lord Jagannath, how he has tricked people. He opened his mouth and he showed the universe to Mother Yashoda, and she was stunned, she was surprised. And then he stole the heart of the gopis. He was a murderer. So, he humanizes the Lord. He talks to him as if a friend sitting beside him, isn't it? Mohanty feels utterly helpless to face the camouflaged modern man. He complains the Lord about them, quote unquote. I'm quoting the poem. My people are no longer my people. False their bondage, their pitiless faces beyond faces. They are ghosts, evil spirits who know how to torture and inflict pain of the innocent who do not know them. In the long run of life, Mohanty learns that patience is best quality. He imbibes patience from Lord Jagannath. And he says, I was foolish, oh my patient Lord. See, he keeps changing his mood and more. I was foolish, oh my patient Lord, chiding you day and night. Hood me with your umbrella when it rains. Plumb me with your love's pollen, and make me a bird so that with my flight I can endure all. Endurance is all. Such beautiful lines. Endurance is all. Again, I'm quoting: train me how to face people who wear stones in their hearts. Train me how to face people.
Professor, you were on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, teach me how to write poems of love, of legends, of laughter, lying asleep on the lap of the air. The all knowing God, the nowhere God. Teach me how to embrace things as they come to me and not as they ought to be. Mohanty's lines are highly alliterative. He uses alliteration, lot of literary devices he uses. Do you think, O Lord, the maker of mangoes, men, and miracles, I wish to win away your moods and mind? Such beautiful lines. Pursued by the present, disturbed by the present, he wants to take recluse in some mysterious state. He believes in a romantic escapism. He escapes to Lord Jagannath. Always in darkness, I'm quoting, always in darkness, I have found solace. In my leaping loneliness, I found grace. Is my world guilt in terrible mess? It is through his love poetry. Mohanty was a romantic. It is through his love poetry that Mohanty could learn how to establish a rapport with the past and the tradition or culture in his later poetry. For him, it's such beautiful lines. I'm quoting such beautiful lines from the prologue to his poetry collection, Krishna. He says, love is a human phenomenon. We divinize it by living it. See, he says that we divinize love, not that divinity or God, they come to us when we love. Rather, we divinize love by living it. So, living a life full of love was his way of life. Similarly, the poet expresses his love for Lord Jagannath with deep emotion in a very humane tone with profound passion. I'm quoting a couple of lines. I wonder and ponder who made you the Lord, the mighty seer of this universe. Ain't you really ashamed of your ugliness? Ain't you ashamed of standing still without feet, receiving gifts without hands, consuming so much of rice for a meal? How he talks to the Lord. Because if you have been to Jagannath Puri, you will see that this Chappan Bhog, 56 varieties of food items are prepared every day for Lord Jagannath. Of course, Jagannath doesn't eat it. Then who eats it? The poor, the needy, the devotees, they eat the Chappan Bhog in the name of Lord Jagannath. And the poet, Mohanty, he is telling the Lord that what all you are doing, and to ashamed of standing still without feet, receiving gifts without hands, consuming so much rice for a meal. The poet's prayers go on to urge the Lord to fill him with love. The final few lines are, make me invisible like a pollen of flower, make me humble like an echo. Now, Niranjan Mohanty was a trendsetter. Through his words and silences, he played the role of a preserver of values, consoler of hearts. His poetry assumes significance as it says the unsaid, discovers the unexpected, reveals the aspects excluded by many sources of his rich experiences. He creates a space necessary for a poet of his status, a space in the new aesthetics and ethics. Following the historiography of Niranjan Mohanty, I, Nandini Sahu, I have been writing poetry since I was 7 years old, and I write witness poetry, social mobility poetry. I'll come to my text now. So I already told you what is witness poetry, quoting Nathan Goldimer, that in the court of law, the witness plays a major role in the case, in any kind of process of the court. Similarly, I believe, following Nathan Goldimer, I believe that the writer plays a major role, the role of a witness in social change, in changing the society towards more progressive and optimistic society. The writer has to play a major role. And I call my literature social mobility literature. I write issue-based poetry. Of course, I thoroughly follow the rhymes and rhythms of poetry. I am a voracious reader. To write one poetry collection, Sita, I read 300 Ramayans, and I traveled all over all those places in the world which cover the Ramayana map of the world, from Indonesia to Bali to Nepal to Sri Lanka to all these places. Also, so many cities in India, Ayodhya, and all that. I traveled all those places and I did thorough research. So this is poetry book Sita that I will be talking now is rather an anthropological text. A lot of research has gone into it, but also this is my labor of love. I have poured myself into it. It's in my blood's flow. I lived Sita when I was writing the poetry book Sita. I felt that the character Sita has gone into me. For example, when I was writing the Canto 24, where Sita is leaving Lord Ram and she's going back to the earth, Mother Earth. I was writing that at 3 a.m. in the night, and when I was writing that canto, I was literally crying. I was shedding tears, and whenever I read that canto, I get tears in my eyes. That how can a woman be treated like this, and then how morally, ethically, emotionally upright she was, and she had all logical answers to the questions that the society put her way. And I took 2 years research to read Sita, to understand Sita. So in fact, since my childhood, I have been reading the Ramayana. I read all spiritual, philosophical, and these texts, the Quran, the Bible, and Gita, Bhagavad, and Veda, and everything I have read. And I tried to make a comparative analysis of the basic spirit of all religions, and I found Sita-ness in all religions. In the Gandhian thought, I found Sita-ness. In the Quran, I found Sita-ness. In the Bible, I found Sita-ness. So I have tried to create that kind of solidarity, that kind of inclusivity in my text, Sita. And I have written Sita as social mobility literature. By reading Sita, if at least one person would change his or her mind about humanity, about women, about the society, then probably my writing this text will be successful. And a lot of universities have been kind enough to include this text Sita in their syllabi of MA English and in their gender studies departments also. And some foreign universities are also teaching this text Sita. And too much of research has been gone into this, and it has been translated to several languages. Having said that, let me come to my text Sita. I aesthetically use myth and folklore as my primary sources and my material for my primary imagination in this book. It's an anthropological, research oriented poetry book, definitely. The Other Voice, The Silence, Silver Poems on My Lips, Sukoma and Other Poems, Sita, Zero Point, and selected poems of Nandini Sahu are some of my poetry collections, where I have written poems about Indian artistic heritage and cultural ecology. I have written specific poems about Goddess Durga as Adi Shakti, Lord Jagannath, Draupadi, Sita, and such other mythical characters. And Sita, a poem, this book which I already showed you, Sita, a poem, and the upcoming poetry collection Karn, a poem, also I have submitted that. That's under means publication now. I've written a complete book titled Karn, a poem, and the format is Champu, Tripadi and Saptapadi. I have followed in different cantos of the book, and the poem Karn, a poem, is under publication now. These are the two complete books on Indian mythologies, mythical characters. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata have taken characters from them. Myth plays an important role in shaping the cultural heritage of a nation, and it functions as a significant tool for the dominant groups, the majority, for imposing its ideology on the subordinate groups. Sometimes we create a Sita myth. I have problematized, to some extent, I have problematized Ramcharitmanas, where a Sita myth has been created. The character of Sita has been projected in a typical way, which is not exactly acceptable to me as a woman, as a person. I cannot accept Sita as a weak character who is docile, who silently, blindly follows the footsteps of her husband to the forest, and who jumps into the fire moment she is asked to, and finally, helplessly, she goes back to Mother Earth. I will not be able to accept this kind of a projection of Sita. For me, Sita is an independent, optimistic, progressive, humanitarian, eco-feministic woman. She was a single mother. She was left alone in the forest when she was pregnant. Without complaining, brooding, crying over her destiny, she gave birth and she groomed her two children all by herself. And she made her children such capable that at one point of time, those children could defeat their own father. They defeated Lakshman, their uncle. They defeated Hanuman. So a single mother cannot be looked down upon. Though I'm not glorifying singlehood, I'm not romanticizing singlehood. Every woman needs a companion beside her, but again, if it becomes her destiny, then let it be. It has to be. So one has to accept it. And Sita never brooded and complained about those. She took life, she took destiny in her stride, and she made the best use of that. In the Valmiki ashram, my Sita was a teacher. She was teaching the moral values, the Vedas, and everything to the ashramites. She was a great cook. She was cooking for the ashramites. She was a healer. She was a touch therapist. She would touch the animals and then she would cure them. So she was a touch therapist. So today we are talking so much about Reiki as touch therapy. And remember Sita's time when she would just touch a deer and the deer would be healed. I have read that in the Valmiki Ramayana, that the deers would come to Sita and they would sit beside her and she would just touch the body of the deer and they would be healed of all their pains. So Sita was the eco-feminist. She was the provider of food, livelihood, support, care, love, everything to the ashramites. And she was so close to nature. She was born from Mother Earth. She went back to Mother Earth. She was close to ecology. So I have talked about that kind of an optimistic, progressive, independent, positive Sita in the text. It doesn't provide, but the kind of mythification the society has been doing about Sita, I have problematized that. Patriarchy and the morals of the society, they have kind of mythified Sita in a way that may not be acceptable to us feminists and eco-feminists. I call myself an eco-feminist and a folklorist. Myths also provide conflicting images of evil women who transgress from the roles assigned to them and are punished for their deviant behavior. The good women like Sita in Ramayana, they are passive, submissive, docile, and self-sacrificing in most versions of the Ramayana and devoted to her husband, while the evil like Supankha, she has been treated as an evil character, is sexually antagonistic, she is forceful. So patriarchy has therefore very strongly created the stipulated qualities of women, two binaries, good women and bad women. Good women like Sita, docile; bad women like Supankha, who was sexually evil. But I try to go somewhere in between those. I try to create the real Sitas. I see Sita in each one of you, all those wonderful ladies sitting in front of me. I see Sita in myself, the real character with all our weaknesses. So in my text, Sita, she also talks about the weaknesses of herself. She questions whole lot of people. She questions herself that when she is in Sri Lanka, she is with Ravan. So in the Ashok Vatika, she questions herself that why did I believe in a golden deer? Nature will never produce a golden deer. Why did I believe in that artificiality? And then I put the lives of my husband and my brother-in-law in danger by pushing them to go and get that golden deer for me. So greed is one quality in some women in herself that she questions, she problematizes. So this is not self-glorification. It's very realistic. Also, she questions Lord Ram that I had some kind of supernatural spiritual power by which I could put a grass between myself and Ravan. And I told Ravan that if you cross this one, then you will be destroyed. So he could not do that. But come to the contemporary society, Nirvaya, come to all these women out there. They may not have that kind of power. So if it is a gang rape, or if it is a rape, or if it is a molestation of a woman, or if a woman has she had to stay out of her house forcefully for a few months for some reason, then should she be thrown away, or the society should accept them back? And then she's questioning her Lord Ram that I lived without you in Lanka, and you questioned my fidelity when I came back, but I did not question your fidelity when you also came back to me after a few months, after 9 months maybe. So if I did not question your fidelity, how can you question my fidelity? That kind of questions she's asking, not just Ram but the entire society. And then she has also answers to that. So this text Sita, it has all questions and also a few answers of solidarity and sisterhood towards the end, that I'll come to that at the end of my lecture. So in my Sita, I'm trying to create women of flesh and blood like you and me, who have their own weaknesses. We are not perfect women. We are neither perfect Devi kind of women, nor we are devil kind of Supanka kind of devil kind of women. We are somewhere between the two, the real women. But look at our movies or our popular literature, or look at the presentation of the women characters in our media, where women are represented either as extremely good or bad, but the real woman is missing. And I am trying to create that real woman with all her optimism, progressive, independent thought process, and then also all her weaknesses in this text. That's what I have tried to create. So women like us is missing, and I'm creating that. And in some cases, myth has been used as an area of negotiation, conflict by the subordinate groups. The role of myth, therefore, is very significant and for the achievement of some kind of cultural hegemony. So through the text, I'm trying to achieve a cultural hegemony through the mythification and the demythification of Sita. My basic idea is, for a minor culture to establish its status, it needs to gain control of myth by demythifying the original or the popular myth. To justify my point, I examine my poetry collection Sita and question the popular myths by portraying the mythical characters from a feminist perspective, basically by talking about the humane Sita, Human human, and also Humane human Sita, and about the Sita-ness of you and me, all women on earth, with their progressive and independent attitude that I have been repeating. The poem is a series of questions asked to and by Sita, who questions the patriarchal authority, holding it
Excuse
responsible.
me, Professor, I would like to chip in here. I will like to chip in here. We have a time schedule here. I'm really sorry. We are loving your lecture, but there's a time constraint here. So I would invite Meghna Bajoria, our Vice President, to take over now, please.
Sonali, let Professor concludes.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll
sir.
conclude.
Sure,
Yes.
sir.
So I'll take another 2 to 3 minutes to conclude.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, in the manner
Yes,
of
sure.
composing witness literature, I involve the reader into the participatory act of reading, as in approximating the broad contours of Sita, taking her out of Sage Valmiki's Adi Kavya. I'm quoting a couple of lines from the text. Call her what you may, Sita, Janaki, Vaidehi, Rama, she is woman. She is every woman, the propagated, interpolated role model. Sita dwells in the Sitapurs, Rampurs, Udaipurs of India. She is on the internet, in the TV, daily soaps, in households, streets, call centers, universities, in temples and churches, in Ceylon, in the backwaters of Kerala, in your concealed perception, and in the Indian constitution. She is the erstwhile woman prime minister of India and the woman president, the multitasking working mother and the homemaker, the gang raped girl in the Delhi bus at night, and the battered baby girl in AIMS Trauma Center. We have a Sita who dwells like in the corridors of power, in the household streets and call centers, in the victimhood of Nirvaya, and in the achievements of all women. Uh, so I'll just go to the last line. I wish I could complete it. Anyway, so in the final line, Sita says, I'm just quoting, I'll conclude here. Yeah, so she says, I am no object of pity. Remember me as nature humanitarian. So my Sita wants to be remembered as an ecofeminist, as a humanitarian representative of nature of planet Earth. Humanly, this is easier said than done, but this is what I have attempted in my mythical poem Sita, to create a progressive, optimistic, independent character. And my theoretical framework is sisterhood and ecofeminism. These two I have used, and I have tried to create a new character, a new woman through the text. I have already emailed the text to Rachna ji, Meghna ji. So if any reader out there, if you want to read the text, they can share that with you. And also that is in my blog. And if you want to have any kind of discussion with me about mythification, demythification, Sita myth, or myth in Indian literature, email me, kavinandini at gmail.com. Thank you.
we've already shared, and we would love to discuss. Yeah.
Super. Out of the word.
Really.
Out of
Today's
the word.
session on the beautiful poetry readings and discussions has truly left us mesmerized. Thank you so much, Professor Nandini, for honoring us with your stellar presence. The insights you gave us about myths in Indian literature was extremely thought-provoking. You have truly opened up a whole new world for us. And so simplistically, you explain new concepts to us like witness literature, palace paradigm. Thank you so much for sharing the wonderful poem Prayers to Lord Jagannath of late Professor Niranjan Mohanty, where he demythified the Lord so beautifully. And also, thank you for sharing the life lessons you learned from him. And in your beautiful poem, Sita, words are less to express.
Super.
Yes, you have truly celebrated womanhood, and we all have truly drawn inspiration on the spirit of Nari Shakti. And you have explained the Sita within us so beautifully. It is definitely a poem which should be read by one and all for the betterment of our society. We look
Yeah.
forward to reading your upcoming work soon. It was an absolute privilege for us having you here with us. Thank you once again so much. Thank you, Professor.